It's really an important document. It's a conversation about the city of Bozeman's future when related to land use. The real purpose of our conversation today is to provide you an overview of the text of the plan, how it functions, listen to your questions and any comments you have, and then ensure we capture the community's desires throughout the development of the draft plan. Also, we really want to provide you the tools and resources so you can have a real solid framework when we move forward in the review and possible adoption process with the City Commission. The process that we'll be following today, I've got a short introduction here to describe how this will work. Then I've got a couple of little interactive things to try to make a little more exciting, some polling questions for you. And then your responses on the first one may alter some of the content that I can provide, at least for this afternoon's conversation. Got a short presentation for you to summarize and give you an overview of the content of the plan. Plan is very succinct and direct and related to land use itself. And with that, we'll rely that you had an opportunity to kind of review and read the document. So I don't want to bore you with details that you can easily see there. So we hope it's informative from that point of view. A few more polling questions for you, and then we're going to open up the majority and the bulk of the afternoon of this meeting to give you an opportunity to ask questions. We will respond the best that we can. If we don't have the information at our fingertips, we'll respond in some way. And also just to remind you that we will be recording today's meeting. We'll be posting this on our website as soon as we can pull it together. So if there's anything that doesn't seem to make sense, you can always review it later on. I want to mention this is the first of 3 conversations. First today, Wednesday. We have another one scheduled for next Wednesday starting at 12 o'clock. And then the final one will be September 30th, starting at was it 4:30 or 5:30? I've got a note here in just a moment. My apologies for not knowing that, but I'll confirm that here in a second. But and that will be so tonight or this afternoon we're speaking about the text. Next week we'll speak about the future land use map, and then the final will be kind of a catch up and mopping up all the issues and questions that people had, and try to fill in some of the gaps if we've missed something in our conversations today. Before we dive into the content, I want to describe how the meeting will work and then how you can ask questions. So we will be using WebEx, that's what we are on, and there's 2 ways or 2 mechanisms that you can use to ask a question. The first and preferred method is using what we call the Q&A or the question and answer tab. That's in the lower right portion of your screen. If you go down there, there'll be a Q, a little ampersand, and then A. If you click on that, it'll open up a dialog box, and you can type in or cut and paste a question or comment that you may have on the plan. And then we as staff will, at the end of the presentation, we'll start going through those questions and whatnot. If we can get through those, in addition, there's a way of raising your hand, and then you can actually ask a verbal question. We prefer it in writing. It's a little easier for us to follow along and then capture those questions that you have, because if there are questions that repeat themselves, then we know that we're missing something, needs to be described, articulated a little bit more in depth, and then we can follow up and try to respond. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, in the lower right corner of your screen is that Q&A spot. Also, if you are just listening in on a phone of some sort, you may not be able to participate in the polling that we have spooled up for you. So if that's the case and you'd like to do that, please log in to the link that's provided on our website for the WebEx meeting. And I will kind of move slowly before we get going here and give anybody an opportunity to alter their way of engaging with today's conversation. Also, this is the first time we're doing this type of meeting, so please be patient. We've gone through it a few times to make sure everything runs well. I think we've got it, but there may be a glitch, and we'll respond to that really quickly. So as you can see on the screen, Lacey pulled up a little polling question. You can please respond to that if you're so inclined, and if you have a moment, and then the answers will actually show up right away so you can get an idea of where we're at. So I'm going to dive into quick the process of how we generated the draft plan. It's not really the focus here, so I'll go pretty quickly. If you've got a question, we can circle back. This draft is actually the culmination of about 2.5 years of work with the city's planning board. They are responsible for initiating this process, developing this draft, and then forwarding it to the city commission for consideration and possible reviews and then possible adoption. They've done an immense amount of work on this draft plan, and we're here before you to describe a little bit of the content and then listen to you. So we broke it down into 4 kind of basic tasks. First, starting with the foundation work of trying to tease out what the community's concerns were and are. And from there, we had a number of public events, meetings, online questionnaires, polls. That's true with our phase 2 and 3 to help refine, better understand what the needs and the concerns are, developing the opportunities, some of the constraints, and then ultimately the draft plan, which is this part 4, which are where we are today. So we're in the draft review of the plan, and then the final component of that. It's up to the city commission to dictate and really tell us how much more outreach and process we have. And I'll circle back to the plan of review that we have scheduled at this time. And we may add some more meetings as we move forward. And really looking at this fall through early winter to complete that particular task. So what is the community plan? This is a long-range document that really informs the commission and how they make decisions and what their hierarchy is and what the community really desires our long-range outcome to be. It's land use specifically this particular time. So since the adoption of our last plan in 2009, we've actually modified, adopted, and changed over 26 city plans, including the strategic plan. Our first community plan was actually adopted in 1958, so this will be our 7th community plan that we've adopted for guidance of the city. And this plan will completely replace the current version that we've been working on for the last 10 years. It really presents the community's vision on development or land use. So it really is important to change it. It impacts everybody's daily lives and your community, your neighborhood that you live and work in. It illustrates our future land use. So as we're fortunate that it's a very desirable place to live, and people continue to move here to raise families, enjoy themselves, and hopefully be prosperous. But it also serves as this implementing, monitoring our achievement if we're just achieving the goals that you, our community, have set out for us to do. So Lacey, maybe I can ask you to turn off that polling feature there, and I could. So the next slide I have here is a population chart, and history does tend to repeat itself, and we rely heavily on data to drive the decisions and how we manage and accommodate the people that are choosing to live in Bozeman. So since 1970 through today, we've had steady population growth, and you can see here that. In fact, it's interesting because in the last time that the MSU Bobcats actually won the national championships, just after that, 1984, was the only time in the kind of the recent history, in the last 50 years, that population has been sort of stagnant and even decreased slightly during that 10-year period. Ever since then, and including the recession back in 2008 through 2009, the city's continued to grow. So our plans in the community plan and specifically does make the assumption that we'll continue to grow. And that is a good place to be in. Communities that are struggling with stagnant population or decreasing population really does bring another set of challenges to them. However, our community is changing, and this plan will help manage and accept that change through time. So I'm going to move on to the next one here and really kind of dive into the plan content. And I'll move quickly here. You can always go back and you can ask other questions and see. Hopefully, we can answer those questions. Pardon me. So the content we've divided the plan is into 5 basic chapters with a separate document of appendices. And in this case, our appendices are pretty important because it's got some assessment of our current real estate market and some other aspects related to that. But it talks about chapter 1, just kind of overarching components of the plan. Chapter 2 are our themes. Those are really our visions. Those are the vision statements of what the community really desires, and I'll dive into those in a moment. Chapter 3 is this future land use, then implementation, then finally amendments and reviews. So chapter 1 describes, what is our planning area? How big are we? Our planning area is about 70 square miles, the city of which within the city limits is considerably smaller than that. However, an awful lot of our planning area is already developed in fairly small lots, whether it's 1 acre to 2 to even 7 or 10 acre lots of existing residential and even some commercial industrial development. That changes how that land can be used for the future. It describes kind of our existing conditions and what the overarching planning precepts are for the city of Bozeman. In addition, which is really important here, are the relationship to other plans. As I'd mentioned, we've touched, evolved, changed, and adopted approximately 26 plans, city plans, in the last 10 years since the last community plan. Chapter 2 describes our themes. We have 7 themes, starting with a resilient city, our city of neighborhoods, these districts, complementary districts, economic and residential, our natural lands, parklands, and open space, and then priorities: accessibility, mobility. We've got a wide variety of users from young and old in the community, and we need to accommodate all of their desires so everybody can have ready access and mobility to wherever their desired locations would be. And economy. We do need a strong economy. And then finally, regional coordination. Many of the bigger challenges that we face as a community are not specific and restricted to the city of Bozeman. Their water, their transportation, all sorts of these really important pieces. Pardon me. So what I've got here is I'm diving deeper into chapter 2. This is pulling out one of the goals, or this is theme 5, referring to the mobility. I'm using this as simply an example of how the plan works and how to utilize it to achieve, and how it will tease out from here to develop potential regulatory context for future development. There's an important statement that helps describe the intent of that theme. And then if you dive down a little bit deeper, there's goals and objectives under each one of these themes. So we can figure out, how will that theme be achieved? How will we measure whether or not we've achieved any forward motion or if we're going the wrong direction? And then we can adjust resources accordingly. So in this case, it's multimodal accessibility. And there are 4 objectives below this goal that we will use to measure and implement this theme. Again, this is all from the plan, so you can easily pull this up and follow along. Chapter 3 is the future land use map. This will be the subject of next week's meeting, so I'm going to touch on it only briefly, and then we will have a further conversation for that next week. But this is your future land use. This indicates kind of the general character of what might happen on a particular area or even a property, but it's not really designated as property specific. It's much more general and long, forward looking. It designates the entire planning area, which roughly is about 2 to 3 miles outside of the existing city limits. So it moves northwest towards Belgrade, out towards Four Corners area, up to the mountains on the kind of the east side of the town. And then really kind of has this broad implementation piece. There's a couple of important parts that are associated with this chapter. First are the descriptions. We've got a more narrowly focused set of future land use designations, and there are 9 of them. Our current plan, in fact, has 12, so we're narrowing that down and then change some of the naming of it so it's more intuitive and is more contemporary in their descriptions. Each one has a series of illustrations to help describe the intent, and then, of course, a description of what it is. In this case, regional commercial and services. These are larger retail outfits, generally pretty dependent on vehicular travel to function. So they tend to be located in larger transportation networks, North 7th, 19th, the frontage road, these types of places. And when you drill down a little bit deeper, this is sort of the nexus between this sort of the policy and how it actually will impact development on a particular property. So to implement each of these classifications, these land use classifications, are a series of zoning districts. And in this case, number 5 right here, the regional commercial and service has 4 possible zoning districts. So that can give you an idea of what might occur in the future, or if you're in the development community and you wish to move forward with a development proposal. In this case, it's your commercial districts. They're business related, multi-use, mixed use, and generally larger demands for those particular areas, including this PLI, which is public lands and institutions. Anyway, this is really a key piece of the entire plan. Moving down this is the kind of the nexus, as I mentioned, between the policy and development. So really the foundation is the document that we're reviewing today, which is the growth policy or community plan. That informs possible zoning districts, and then the zoning on a particular property in turn informs like the type of subdivision and the actual site plan activity and development that would occur. There's a map that's associated with it. I've got one here for reference. We can come back to it at least briefly, but again, this will be the conversation for next week. So hope to focus a little bit more on the text today. Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is the implementation. How will we achieve our goals? There's a list of metrics, measurable outcomes that we're going to use to see if we're going the right direction. It's got a series of short and longer term action plans. And it's really, there's an immense amount of work to do here. When we do our evaluations of our current plan, we've achieved a great deal of those objectives. There's still more work to do, and much of that work has been tied into this draft plan that we're considering today. Mentioned pulling back the example from before, the prioritization of mobility. So these are the possible metrics that we have, and it speaks to transit usage. We've got our streamline here in the valley. The city doesn't have direct control over streamline, but we are a partner with that service, and we certainly hope to foster better routes, more frequent routes. But again, all of that, of course, takes resources. We're focused on safety, but making an environment that is functional and easy for people to use alternative methods of transportation to achieve the daily needs. And we've got indicators are going up, increasing usage, decreasing injuries, and those types of things for that actual metric. Finally is chapter 5. It's a very important chapter, like all of the pieces, because it's a very dense document. This indicates like how you change future land uses for a particular property, how amendments occur, and much of this might be indicated by state regulation. There are a few items in here that need to be mentioned and are really important. So to achieve this, the goals of the plan, the commission may need to take action in some cases. And in this case, we have drafted and proposed some criteria that the commission will consider if they want to change a particular zoning district on a particular property. This is something that's new that the planning board has added for consideration for this plan. I've got it here. I'm not going to go through each particular one, but I do want to point that out and give you a chance to read through that and see if that resonates with some of your desires and needs. So that really is the overview of the content. For the next steps, as I mentioned today, we have a conversation today about the text. Next Wednesday, we'll have a conversation and a dialogue referring to the future land use map. And then on the 30th, kind of a potpourri, a follow-up, fill in, try to answer some of the gaps of things that we've missed or that you'd like to talk about more. Following that, the City Commission will start considering, they've got a number of work sessions and public meetings scheduled October 6th, October 20th, and then starting on November 17th, if things are moving in a fashion that seems appropriate for the Commission, we might initiate some public hearings for possible adoption of this plan. So if there's any of you that are not aware of how to get your own copy of this, both the plan, the appendice, and the map that's associated, we've got a project website on the city's webpage. It's called the Bozeman Community Plan. If you click on that, there's a little highlight at the top. Follow that, the Bozeman Community Plan, and that will bring up that page. And you can click down those. You can have your own version. You can print it however you see fit. And that really brings my comments to a close. I've got another little poll for you shortly, but I want to really open up at this point and give you an opportunity to ask questions and we can get things going. If you've got a comment or a question that's a little more lengthy, please send that to agenda@bozeman.net. We will follow up from there. And I really sincerely appreciate your time, any thoughtful for your joining us this afternoon. And there's a couple of staff members here. We hope to answer any questions that you have. And then with that, that really brings my comments to a close. So again, thank you. In the lower right corner of your screen, hopefully you will see that Q&A. If you've got a question, comment, again, cut and paste, send that in, and we'll respond in order from that. And then if we get through all those comments, anybody that might have their hands raised, we will promote you. You can ask a question over the telephone or over your computer, and we will respond. Again, thank you for your time. I think I may. Well, I'll stop sharing my screen here. You can see some faces here, and then we can get going with some questions. Again, thank you very much.
Tom, we do have a few questions to answer. I'll release this this next poll. And then let me know when you're ready to start addressing questions.
Sounds great. I have to open up. Okay, got a few here. I won't let's see here. I may write some down, so we want to capture these questions, and then we will I'll take a shot at answering. I've got a colleague, Mr. Chris Saunders, here with me, who may be able to provide me some more support. But the first question I have here is, does this plan assume that growth will happen to Bozeman, or that we will attempt to manage the amount of growth that Bozeman can handle? That's a great question. I touched on it earlier with my population chart showing that we have continued to grow at a fairly high rate. This plan does assume that more people will continue to move into the city limits. And it's with that context that the goals and objectives are there to maintain character, existing character, provide sufficient area for different types of uses, whether it's commercial, industrial, and residential, and all the other supporting pieces such as schools, institutional uses. There are a lot of planning concepts of suggesting that there's growth boundaries or limits to particular cities. We live in Montana, and there's certain enabling acts that the legislature has. And the city of Bozeman has never employed a kind of a strict growth management. That growth is truly dictated by our utilities, water, availability of sewer, and transportation. So we do not allow development to occur until there's adequate water and sewer and roads to support that development. And I may stop there, and perhaps Mr. Saunders would have to would care to elaborate. But that's the kind of a general overview.
Thanks, Tom. We will talk about this in some more detail next week, but one thing that the planning board and the staff always keep in mind is that we are not operating in a vacuum. We operate in conjunction with or in the context of a number of other local governments, including the county and Belgrade and others, and there's interactions between those that affect how and where and when the city may be able to grow. And so we plan in coordination and try to exchange information with those other local governments. And we certainly influence each other's direction. So I think I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Chris. All right. Somebody commented wondering if I was suggesting the Cats would ever win the national championships again, and I certainly hope they do, but I'm not sure if that correlates to the decrease in population is my suggestion there. So the next question here is relating to housing affordability. And does this plan reflect the goal of upzoning mentioned in the Community Housing Action Plan? And then how does the plan reflect the Community Housing Action Plan's goals for spurring additional affordable housing development in qualified census tracts? Clearly a knowledgeable person asking that question. And I will start, and I may rely on Mr. Saunders again, but first is we have specifically tied the goals and objectives of the Community Housing Action Plan into the land use plan by ensuring that we have adequate supply of residentially developed lands, providing all the necessary support networks for water, sewer, transportation, schools, parks, open space, and the like. And City of Bozeman, as we're growing, we're nearly 50,000 people in resident, and with the census tracts and how they're apportioned in the city, we'll learn quite a bit of that shortly. But I may stop there before I say something that's not correct, and maybe rely on Mr. Saunders to dive in a little deeper on that. But I certainly appreciate the question.
Thanks, Tom. Regarding the first part of the question on upzoning, that's part of what Chapter 5 addresses. The plan itself does not change any zoning. Zoning is a separate legal process, but the plan does help set guidelines and guidance. And for the first time with this document, the city is proposing to adopt specific descriptions of how the city thinks about and will apply the land use criteria or the zoning criteria that any zoning change looks at. And you had a slide earlier that identifies from the plan some of the elements that the city takes into consideration if we're looking at a change in zoning. It would be a policy change overall. The city generally has in the past allowed private development to bring in proposals for rezoning, has not taken a lot of efforts to initiate zoning directly, but they certainly can. And so that's an option that will have to be discussed with the city commission. Only they can make that decision. Second part of the question about spurring additional low-income housing tax credits. As you mentioned, part of that is designating areas that are appropriate for housing. Part of it is also looking at coordinating things like utility availability so that there are fewer constraints and people being able to construct more intensive levels of housing. There's all kinds of details we get down to individual tracks, but probably beyond the scope of this conversation today. But if folks are interested in that, we could have some further conversation.
Thank you, Chris. Hopefully that provides a little context. There's I've got another. The next question here is sort of specific for a particular neighborhood, and the question really is how can this organized group of individuals of kind of consisting of a neighborhood, how can they influence some needs that they have in their community or in this neighborhood for some pathways? And there's a petition that they've created and have signed. In these cases, there's a couple of options or a couple of suggestions that staff would have. First is we always encourage comment directly to the City Commission during their public opportunity to comment during a commission meeting. Secondly is the community development does host an online development tool that shows all current development that's been going on and even includes historical. You can toggle that piece on and off, and it will show you what's being developed in the area. And if there's something that's related to your area, you can comment, you can submit those requests, and that might be the best way to ensure that your concerns are considered during a particular development review or development application process. If in this case, it may kind of fall within the Parks and Trails Department, and we do have a couple of great folks there that you can forward this information to that department, and they can follow up and may have some suggestions for you on that specific development idea. And I hope that may give you a couple of tools and resources in that particular question. So moving on to the next, let's see here. There's a question of how does the city identify sensitive environmental areas during the development review process or applications? It's tied to one of the themes or a couple of our themes in the draft plan. There's a variety of very specific goals and objectives and how we will do that. But the city doesn't have a comprehensive, detailed summary of all sensitive areas within the city boundaries. We do require full data and analysis with the submittal, whether it's site plan or subdivision. And based on that information, there's a fairly rigorous set of standards that need to be met. For example, for riparian areas, waterways, and floodplains, all of those are often intermixed. We've got minimum setback requirements. There are planting requirements to ensure that the appropriate types of foliage is planted in these areas to further water retention, detention, and the cleansing attributes of dealing with turbidity, for example. Only limited development can occur in these sensitive areas, and there's more than likely additional review and permitting processes. And if it's something more significant, for example, would be the Army Corps of Engineers may need to provide some review and approval prior to any construction in designated wetlands. We are fortunate. There's a great deal of water, both wetlands and ways traversing the community. And it's interesting is the development in the community has been so rapid and is starting to bump up that the easy lots for development seem have been developed. Those that are left, we're finding a little more complicated, and there's more issues and concerns that the development community needs to consider with their review and approve process. So we've got a set of, again, standards for what's permitted. We require first full assessment with that, and those safeguards and approvals need to be in place prior to the city approving any development application. give Chris an opportunity if you think something more needs to be added. Otherwise, I move on to the next question.
Thanks, Tom. This is an issue the city's been working on for a long time. The city did a critical lands study initiated by the planning board back in the late 90s. That was kind of the first time we took a serious look at this, and the city's been working on it ever since. The ability these days to share information across different agencies is reflected in the city's geographic information system, which is available to the public through the website, where you can identify wetlands and water courses and various kinds of things. As you mentioned, we require a lot of information at the time of development. And partly the reason for that, rather than the city going out and doing all of that work in advance, is that those environmental features do change over time. And to go out and map to a high degree of precision would be very expensive, which we have not committed as a community for the resources to do. And also many of those items are outside of the city limits. And so we try to coordinate with the county's geographic information systems department and other agencies to make that information available. So it is an ongoing process and effort, both at a large scale as we continue to refine data collection, but also at a site-by-site project as you described.
It appears I missed one question just before this last one, which I think the question is relating to the change in the commission schedule. So those of you who may not know, the city commission historically has met on Mondays. They've changed that to Tuesdays, and there's a question of the commission change in the city commission. Oh, perhaps it would be, pardon me, I think I'm on reflection, I believe it probably referring to the resignation of our mayor and changing of the dynamic of the city commission. Will that change the adoption process for this plan? I'll be honest, I don't have the answer to that. I am assuming and planning on moving forward as the schedule is been laid out. Until we hear differently, we're going to move forward with that, engage as much with the community as we can, capture this information, bring it to the city commission for their considerations, and we're going to keep moving forward. I know the city manager is also supportive of this at this point, but we will keep you abreast if anything changes. But great question. Thank you. Next question I think I see here is really pretty interesting again, is how do we, and I guess I'll take it more broadly, is how do we expand our roadway network? So for example, 19th, particularly if you look at some of the roadways that are kind of south and southwest of Montana State University's 11th, the extension of these roads, it's like, how do we deal with that? There's a variety kind of a different classifications of our roadway system. We've got local roads, which most kind of homes are based of. We've got larger transportation networks, and some of which are related to Montana Department of Transportation, and some are the responsibility of the city. So we do have a long-range transportation plan. That transportation plan is intimately tied to this community plan, the land use plan, and our capital improvements plan, which is the CIP. So the city commission does review on an annual basis what funds will be used and where we apply these limited resources for street improvements, sewer and water improvements are guided by this plan. So if you look at what is important here, you correlate that to the other adopted plans, that will inform the capital improvements plan. The commission annually reviews that during public meetings. It's a really great time to influence how and where the city will develop in the future. But for local streets, the development community, if they propose something, that does not have existing streets, such as infill, those local streets are required to be constructed by the developer through the subdivision process or through a particular site plan. There's quite a few examples of that around town. If it's a larger street, there are some sharing mechanisms that are in place to make sure that a particular roadway will be constructed to meet the expected demands and needs for the community. I think I may stop there. Chris, if you have any comment or if you think that's sufficient, we can jump down to the next question.
Yeah, I think I just note for folks who are interested in pursuing that, the transportation plan, stormwater, water, sewer plans are all available through the city's website under the engineering division. So if folks are interested in seeing the details, that information is available. One of the elements that's an important component in this document that's a first with the evolving technology is the ability in the document to embed hyperlinks so that if you're reading through the document, you will see a list of other plans of the city that relate to a particular topic. Tom, you mentioned transportation. And so the transportation plan would be one of those plans that would be linked along with the safety plan and other plans. So if you're reading this online, which is how we expect most people to actually get to the document, you would be able to go and click on that and go directly from this document, the growth policy, to that specific topic plan that gets right down into all the details probably that you'll ever want to spend time reading about that subject. And that is throughout the document. Tom mentioned 26 other plans that the city has, ranging from housing to stormwater and all kinds of other things. All of those are linked and connected with this document. That's all.
I've got another question here that is kind of interesting, and we have a person participating who submitted some questions to the agenda.net. Thank you for doing that. Unfortunately, we don't have access to those here. I will make it a point to follow up with those, and I can provide that information and maybe some comments and responses in future meetings, whether it's the commission or even at future of these kind of work sessions that we're hosting today and for the next couple of weeks. So I'm sorry I cannot respond to those, but if you have one of those that's readily available, please cut and paste, throw them in there. We're actually getting fairly low to the written comments. And from here, we'll bounce over and see if anybody has their hand raised. And you can ask a question right here and we'll respond from there. But I think that's the end of those. We'll keep posted if any additional written questions or comments are provided, and we'll circle back. But maybe I can ask for some help from Ms. Klusterhoff here, is if we have anybody who's raised a hand and maybe willing and desired to ask a question.
There aren't any hands raised currently, but I am keeping an eye on this list. If you have a question, you should be able to find that hand in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Or you can submit in the Q&A field. Tom, there is one question here that we missed. Are there plans for expanding roads such as 19th Avenue? Oh, you address that. We're good.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to hold tight here. If anybody has any additional thoughts or comments, we still have some time here. We've got one more quick poll for you we're going to put up. Please respond. We're using this to help guide ourselves and make sure we are providing good information and get the information that you would like to have here. But we sincerely appreciate your time and energy here. Look forward to working with you in the future. But we'll be here. We've got another meeting scheduled really talking about the future land use map specifically, or chapter 3. next Wednesday at the same time. And then, of course, a follow-up meeting the following week, later in the afternoon to early evening. But again, sincere thanks. Appreciate your time and hope you found it useful.
And we are encouraging folks to send in public comment. Tom had that slide up earlier, agenda@bozeman.net, or you can mail it in to the city's P.O. Box 1230. Public comment has been a significant influence on this document so far. Was a key part in defining the themes. So we encourage folks to continue to be involved and share their thoughts with the City Commission. City Commission are the folks who will ultimately decide the final shape of the document. So look forward to hearing from you.
We did receive one more question, if there's time to answer, Tom.
There is. I have to stop sharing my screens and then pull up the Q&A here. Let's see here. Perhaps you can read it, so I'm having a little trouble. Oh, here we are. Here we are. Oh. Okay, so this is a question referring to some of our commercial zoning districts in what we call B3. B3 is our most intense kind of urban character zoning district. And this is related to the plan by these future land use designations and what zoning districts would be permitted. But B3 at the moment is exclusively associated or related to downtown, the historic district, and other. And it really is relating to transitions between this urban center, urban core, and the adjacent residential area. There are a number of goals and objectives that are listed in this plan that address this concern. Many of you know we've had quite a bit of community conversation about the more urban nature of some of the more recent development. We did, and a result of that, the commission did adopt a number of transition standards that are in our zoning code that people need to follow. And they're triggered. They're not triggered in all cases, but they are triggered when there's a larger differentiation between building mass and height and the adjacent development. And what's really interesting about this comment or this question is one of the outcomes for this conversation is when does the city commission consider a zoning changing or an upzone change? We have concluded or included that review criteria in this plan. So that will be really important. You may want to take a closer look at that. The plan, however, doesn't specifically state or have that regulatory context for how we're dealing with transition zones, but it does have some policy statements, and we will be following up on that. And that's some of the metrics that we've included in the plan of how we will measure the success. And that'll be one that won't be answered immediately with this plan, but it will initiate that conversation. And then over time, you'll hopefully start to see some movement on how the city could address those types of challenges. Again, Chris, if you have any additional comments, feel free to weigh in. But thank you for posting that question. Great question.
I think you answered it fine, Tom. I don't think I have anything to add. Thanks.
Lacey, do you see any hands raised at this point? I don't see any, but that's okay.
No, just doing a last check to make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh. And our last poll closed.
Well, again, we've got a few moments left. If anybody has any closing ideas and comments, let us know. But I'll hold tight here until our designated time at 1 o'clock. And again, thank you all for your time and joining us this afternoon. We certainly appreciate the feedback.